Welcome everybody to tonight's State of the Table. We are about to go ahead and throw some virtual dice with some artificers. But before we do that, Mr. Miller is diving into the tinfoil hat section of the pool this afternoon with a little bit of theory. So anyway, before we get into that, gentlemen,
juicy tinfoil hat,
hot
gossip.
juicy tinfoil action. So, Mr. Miller, the microphone is yours, sir. What do you got?
So I was listening to some of our older episodes while checking out some recent videos from a couple different content creators on YouTube this week, and a few things struck me. Josh, you started it. Glenn, you continued it in our recent Crin UA episode. Ted from Nerd Immersion dropped a video just the other day talking about this topic. D&D Shorts, which is a newer podcast, a newer YouTuber that I haven't seen until recently. He was talking about it in his detailing of Monsters of the Multiverse, this topic. And they are both coming to the same conclusion. That conclusion is WotC is slowly doing away with the short rest mechanic. They are finding ways to take it out of things. Specifically, D&D Shorts called on the fact that almost any race, lineage, whatever you choose to call it, that had short rest mechanics that was updated in Monsters of the Multiverse, they were all removed.
Ooh.
And
Okay.
I didn't pick up on that. But everyone they mentioned in the two videos I watched was absolutely correct. Like that short rest mechanic for racial options has been removed. Josh,
How many racial options had a short rest?
Quite a few. Like I think he mentioned 2 or 3 that where it came up, because it's actually what started me listening to older things, because I knew I'd heard it before. Went back to our current episode.
Gotcha.
And Josh,
okay.
You had mentioned that you didn't like the fact that it didn't seem to be anything in the Crin UA that dealt with short rest mechanic. And you followed that by saying that it seems like they keep using this spending hit die mechanic that you've heard about it. There's going to be more on it. Jeremy Crawford did a video where he talks like it's coming also. So these things are all closely tied.
I commented on how that was putting a resource management clench on your hit dice that you need for hit point recovery on the short rest.
But if the short rest goes away, that becomes a non-issue. That's where Ted from Nerd Immersion did some detailed, his video was about 30 minutes, a little over 30 minutes, where he did some deep dive onto the issue, where he talked about some things like he has contacts, people who were part of the original D&D Next playtesting. And some of those individuals, they remained unnamed in the video, had actually commented they were surprised that certain things got into the actual game. They specifically mentioned bonus actions was something they thought was going to go away. It was not something that they actually particularly cared for. So they were surprised that came into the game. Short rest was another one of those things that they did not expect would make it to the final game. And he talked at great length about the fact that it seems like in the background, as we're changing things, more and more things are happening. And he actually went so far as to talk about this started happening a long time ago. Almost 2 years ago now, we're talking these changes started happening one at a time back in Tasha's. If you take a look at the Blade Singer, what was a short rest mechanic in the original Sword Coast Adventure Guide, when Blade Singer was updated for Tasha's, that was one of the first things to switch to remove the short rest mechanic from the subclass.
Wow.
So
okay.
I thought this was interesting. I don't have a lot of conclusions to draw at this point. But for content creators that are out there working on projects for new books and things like that, if they're not out yet and they're coming, this is something to keep in mind. If you're building mechanics into your things that involve that short rest, understand that while it may work for right now, the game appears to be moving away from that. And this conversation is getting a lot of headwind.
All right. So that's a lot to unpack. And I have mixed feelings. Mostly, I don't know, it took me a while to get used to the short rest mechanic, but I like it now that I've gotten used to it. But personally, if we think this is any kind of an eminent change, that can't really happen until either a full release 5.5 or a 6th edition, just because of the volume of rules put out with it so far. So
Correct.
Unless they put out a 5.5 and make all of 5th edition obsolete, it's not going to be until either 5.5 or 6.
So how many rules are we talking about? So we're talking about like abilities that recharge on a short rest.
Almost everything about the warlock.
They already say short rest or long rest.
So warlocks and fighters And while
Yeah.
they say either or, that greatly changes the
Arcane
whole
recovery for wizards.
For wizards. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a lot of what Ted got into in his conversation. Think about this with the warlock. They have a very small amount of spells, and it is specifically designed because they get them on short rest.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to see is enough things move away from it so nobody else gets entrenched to it. So when they do make the big change, it's only one or two things. But
Right.
now let's talk fighters. Take spell casting out of it. Everything on a fighter is on a short rest.
Yeah.
Everything.
Action
Surge,
surge.
including your second win. Everything they do is on a short rest.
Right.
Yep.
And the short rest mechanic honestly makes sense. Why wouldn't you stop after a fight and take a minute to bandage your wounds, catch your
Yeah.
breath?
If I were to make a guess, I believe the answer is if you look at the way most of the tables I see are gaming, while people ask for short rest, DMs don't like giving it, or players complain that they don't get it. And there's a big brouhaha over that. That is something we see time and time again on the interwebs. And I think the idea is take away a pain point from the game.
Yeah.
And if you can work around it, and there are some critical key issues, warlock fighters, I'm looking at you, that have to really be thought carefully about how do we rework that. My guess is they're making all of the other changes in the background because you can do that now. And then 5.5 will change those two things. I guess I did have a conclusion. That's my thought about what's going to happen. I just wanted to also get on the air tonight and say, hey, we scooped some of the bigs. To be fair, they've mentioned it a couple times, or that's odd. I think was said back in Nerd Immersion's Tasha's review. I don't think we picked up on it back in Tasha's, but we certainly picked up on it in the UA where why is this happening? And Glenn, you were very hot to point out, I don't like with that specific power paying for that power with hit dice.
Yeah.
I like, in theory, the concept of paying for things with hit dice, but I have yet to see the power that I think it works for. That's my thing. I think the mechanic is sound, but it's got to have a better execution.
So I'm all about narrative and how it connects. We had this discussion. We were talking about something we were creating a little while ago. So if it's going to go that route, it has to have a narrative reason.
Yes.
Yep.
And I agree. And I think that's why it didn't sing with that particular power within the Kryn UA that we discussed. And this was the original Kryn UA, not the new,
not the revised one, right?
Right.
Not the
We're talking
revised
about
one.
hit dice. So if
Right.
you're going to make that narrative, then whatever you're spending hit dice on should be hit dice health related.
Needs to make some narrative sense. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It has to do with the core of your constitution.
I wouldn't mind hit dice spending for psionic ability. That would make sense to me because it's part of your core, part of your essence. Psionics, part of your mind, part of your essence. I could see that correlation if there was something that was done there.
I might be able to see that one too, depending on how it was structured.
Yeah. But that was my
All
take today. It was
Yeah.
an interesting conversation.
That is interesting.
I'm hoping that we continue this conversation as we see new products come out, as we work on new products, something to keep in mind. And more importantly, or as importantly, I hope our audience, both viewing and listening, takes the time to join in the conversation, subscribe, smash that notification bell, and be sure to comment because comments are how we keep the conversation rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everybody for listening. We want to hear your comments on this, and we're going to go throw some dice now with some artificers. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Today's episode
State of the table
of conspiracy theories.
Okay, we can put the tinfoil hats away now.
Yeah, I'm going to start wearing a tinfoil hat on these. All right. Good night, everybody.